Hi, my name is Bruce Bolger, and I'm founder of the Enterprise Engagement Alliance and its Brand Media Coalition, which are dedicated to a strategic and systematic approach to people management across the enterprise and to clear metrics, processes in the concept of total rewards. So today we're here to have an update. Every year we do this to get the state of ROI. And frankly, you might wonder, well, why don't we have a bunch of corporations here? Well, when we get into the subject matter, you never want to have a webinar where you embarrass people, because in most cases, companies do not measure these programs, and it's hard to find companies that do. But we're going to find out from people who can be very objective about it. And that is, first off, starting with Rick Garlick. He's principal consultant, chief research advisor for the Incentive Research Foundation, but he's principal consultant, I should say, for Rick Garlick and Associates, that has done some pretty important work in the engagement and rewards and recognition space. Then we have Lincoln Smith. He's chief strategy officer for HMI Performance Incentives. And you're going to notice a pattern here. We have people here with a lot of experience because we want to get a historic perspective. And not only does Lincoln bring that from his experience at HMI, but he's also the head of the IESP Council, that is the Engagement Council for the Incentive Marketing Association. Then we had Jackie Busby, and she's CEO and chief strategist for Lux Incentives. And one of the reasons we have her, you'd never know that she's been in the business for decades, over 30 years. But also on top of that, well, by hanging out at beaches like that, that's why, I can say that, I guess. But anyway, the point is that you have really been a pioneer in bringing to the market ROI, and we're going to discuss that more because, it's not an easy story to be ahead of your time. So Jackie, we're going to talk to you about that. And then we brought in Rick Connor because he comes from the market. He's with a company that's been in the market for 12 years, and he doesn't come from the incentive market. Their whole space, their whole Incentko, his company, comes at it from the perspective of originally the multifamily housing and helping companies in multifamily manage employees, manage tenants, and relationships like that. So we're getting this from a bunch of different perspectives. We're about ready to get started. I just wanted to, of course, remind everybody that the EEA and the Brand Media Coalition provide a ton of free information promoting best practices, going back decades, thousands of articles, a lot of it free. So always take advantage of that. And we always have to thank the companies, many, many companies in all areas of total rewards that are dedicated to promoting a strategic and systematic approach and better practices. So I'm now going to end the share, and we're going to get into the session. If I can just end the share, bear with me 1 second. There we go. So Rick, I'm going to start with you right now. What is, while I get this darn thing unshared, what is the state right now of ROI? From what you see, you guys do a bunch of surveys. Am I being a little cynical, unfair? For the record, I think it's gotten a little better, but for the most part, how strategic and systematic are, from all the research that you've seen, and you go back to Gallup days, in the application of general incentive programs and recognition?
Yeah, and I can answer that question pretty easily. We do different studies. I've worked on the Site Incentive Travel Index. I've worked on ROI studies for the IRF. And what we typically see is people saying, hey, I really would like to measure the ROI in my incentive programs. And we think it's important, but I don't know how. And that's the big thing. So we've got about 20% of people who I think typically say, hey, we've got pretty good measurement systems. Whether they do or not, I don't know. But I think the biggest problem, the biggest challenge is people just don't know how to do it. And, we typically say, hey, how do you measure the success of your program? And people will say, well, we just know it's always been a good part of our culture and it's got a good vibe associated with it. So, we believe
relationship builder,
all of that. But how do you even measure that, Jackie? I mean, that's the question. I mean,
well,
how do you know if
they keep on coming back?
Folks. Hold on, we're going to move on to that. So we're going to get to that. So Lincoln, again, you haven't been in the business, I don't think, 42 years yet. but your company has. And you're chief strategy officer, and you're very much involved with IMA. And I know you guys promote measurement, but generally speaking, you talk to a lot of people. How scientific and disciplined is measurement, do you think, in the typical incentive program? Not just your company, but show up in RFPs. Are the clients demanding measurement metrics?
Right. Yeah, no, I think what Rick was saying is spot on. I think that there's definitely a thirst for it. I think there's a better awareness that's growing over time. So I think that's one of the trends that I've seen over the last 20 years or so. I think that, most brands and entities understand that it's something that they should be paying attention to, but the actual skills and the tools and the know-how and the resources that they're allocating don't necessarily align with that. So I think the intent and people's desire is higher today than it ever has been. And I see that trend happening, but there's still a huge gap on, the expertise and the tools, to do so. And, of course, all of us on the panel, we're obviously here because we're experts and we believe in this. So, of course, our programs are very intentful on, understanding the goals, KPIs, and driving towards the ROI. But, when you start to sit down with new clients or prospects or talk to other industries or do a lot of reading, even with the IRF, you clearly see that it's not really being done, in a systematic and a very consistent way out there today, Bruce.
Well, we're going to get to that in greater detail. Rick, and by the way, I must explain to everybody, we're lucky to have Rick Connor. He's the airplane on your screen, or the jet on your screen, and he is with his son in Washington celebrating spring break and other exciting news. So please forgive him for, otherwise I think we'd be seeing a crazy background and he wanted to forgive us. But anyway, so Rick, you came at the industry from a totally different standpoint. You don't come with the history that the other people on this call come with. So you guys—
He is a CPA though.
So Rick, I didn't know that. So even more interesting, I didn't know that. Thank you, Jackie. So Rick, what about, you guys came at this from clients that had a need. Your clients didn't need to give away rewards. What's your perspective on a discipline measurement, especially if you're a CPA, which I did not know?
Yeah, so from my original background, it was very measurable, right? The reason that we came up with initially Incentko was a different model to reward, incentivize, etc., our clients instead of reducing the value of our assets. So there was a business case. How do we do this while still achieving our objective, rather than just giving free rent in this particular case? We created obviously Incentko, and here we are, which kept the value of the assets up. So there was a solid business case. That's a very easy thing to measure. It's black and white. I think, and Lincoln touched on this a little bit, the problem that I see in dealing with prospects and existing clients is they don't know what they don't know. And many of them, we have to educate them. We have to learn their business while we're going in front of them and coming up with ideas for them to maybe, because many times don't even understand where the inefficiencies lie. They know they're there. They just don't know where they lie. And more importantly, data. Data is absolutely the biggest monster and barrier that I see in getting these people, and the ease of data, of gathering that data and putting it in a format that everyone can understand, of making these programs work. Because there's plenty of them out there. We can all go through business case studies of why these things work, whether it's sales, whether it's risk management, whatever your industry is, there's a plethora of this stuff. But the barrier is most of the clients, unfortunately, they don't have the access to the data in a format that they can actually put on paper to actually measure it. It's not 2 + 2 = 4. It's not as easy to quantify a lot of these things. Some of it is, some of it isn't. But I would say the biggest thing that I've seen since my tenure at Incentko is just simply that. Some of it's very, very easy to do, but most of it is gathering the data, getting that into a format that makes some sense, and getting it in black and white and pushing that out. And many times, unfortunately, clients don't have the resources to do that. Many times we'll get a question, how much time, who's going to do all this? It becomes so big to them that they just say, if it's not broke, I'm not going to fix it. I'm going to go some other way. So we're trying over at Incentko, we're trying to come up, and there's other companies are doing it too out there, is AI is huge, right, for us. And we're right on the cusp of launching this, where we're going to help them understand. We're going to use IA technology to go ahead and help them understand, how do I quantify this? How do I save this? How do I do that? You know, to help them, because it's just a big monster. It's a long answer. It's a very short question.
Well, we'll get to give you a chance to talk more about the technology role in a minute. Now, Jackie, one of the reasons I wanted you on this call is that I personally know that you have been evangelists for this since the late 90s or early 2000s.
A few decades ago.
And you seized on the work first of the master measurement model that the original Incentive Research Foundation, I guess, published, which we still have on our website, by the way. And then you worked with a gentleman named Bob Dawson. I think he's retired now, who took the concept of statistical process controls, built a software product around it that would enable companies to rapidly create measure the ROI using basic statistical process controls proven in the total quality management world. Bob did an awful lot to promote it. You embraced it. What's the truth about what happened to it?
Well, I'm just getting started, Bruce.
Again, I'm asking you the history, because I think the past is prologue.
Well, my personal history is that because I'm a big line item in the budget, I experienced getting cut because you get a new management, new strategic thinking in place, and they can't justify the spend, so they want to look good, and they cut me your $500,000 trip, and so then I really discovered that I needed to do the return on investment work that my clients weren't doing for them in order to not have to go prospect and get new business, right? And so yes, it was met with, I think people are comfortable. I mean, one of my clients uses the penny overbill. They overcharge on every product they sold by a penny to accrue for the trip. I mean, I've just seen some very chaotic strategies. I have a lot of good old boy clients, you know what I mean? And they are reluctant to embrace this change. But I have like a new mindset and a new incentive platform that I'm using to really take it baby steps and bite size and visually show leaderboards and make this process safe. And I do most of the work for them. And I'm not giving them a choice. I'm just doing it.
Well, we're going to circle back to that. Thank you, Jackie. And this can be a quick question for all of you. And in fact, Jackie, I'm going to be fair. I'm going to start back with you on this one. So get ready. This is agree or not. I think the reason these things aren't being measured more than anything else is that the people who have the budgets aren't being forced by the CEO to do it. Period. The end. The CEO and the CFO have agreed they're going to do it. It's a sunk cost. A lot of times they go on the trip, they love it, they see everybody's motivated. And so I think the problem, and if it is a problem, it's that the CEO generally or CFO doesn't demand measurement. You think I'm right, Jackie? It's not coming down from the top.
Yeah, I think if they do measuring, they'll use it to shift market share, steal business from a competitor by offering them a trip. I think that's one of the ways that they can really implement some ROI, but then they never take it to say, I have this new business because of this trip. So they don't ever finish the process. That's why they really need a done for you solution. And this strategic thinking has got to come from the top down. And that's what you're asking me. They don't have the appetite, and they also don't like to change. And incentives is all about creating lasting behavioral changes. It's like a damn diet with a measurement at the end.
So Rick, you're saying in your field, there has been, does the CEO really say, all right, I'm using this Incentko platform now. I want to see how it drove retention. In your case, I want to see how that incentive helped me reduce my free rent expenses, or how it helped create better goodwill, or it helped me keep tenants longer. Do you think there's any growing appetite? Isn't the problem that no one's being pushed to really measure these programs? They either believe in them or they don't.
Well,
do you
let me
think?
just let me just reinforce what Jackie said and say that, to your question, Bruce, no, I don't think there's an appetite at the C-suite level to do these things, because these are tactical kinds of things of going in and identifying the variables that you want impacted and all of that. But it behooves the incentive provider to do that for the company. And here's why. In 2008, that was never being done. And the industry really got caught with its pants down whenever the recession hit. And we had things like the AIG effect, where all of a sudden incentive travel was under fire. And
Boondoggle, right?
yeah, boondoggle. And then you had politicians who were really saying nasty things about incentive travel. And there was no comeback by the industry. They hadn't thought about these things. So, again, the old fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. That the industry got much, much smarter about this moving forward. And even prior to the pandemic, I saw signs in the economic yield curve. And as I went out to speak on this, I really talked about the importance of measurement and showing ROI. And sure enough, and I'm not taking credit for this, I think people were doing this, but when the pandemic hit, yes, programs got cut. In some cases, they got cut radically, but not as much as you would think. The IRF was continuing to monitor this, and it was surprising the fact that these incentive programs were still resilient enough to not get cut entirely, cut back, but not cut. And
or moved to individual travel,
Yep.
or merchandise.
Well,
Yeah.
all those sorts of things. But I do believe it's because of the work of people like Jackie and others. Their companies were smart enough to know that, all right, the CEO and the leaders, they're not going to think about this. So we need to think about it for them. And I think people have gotten a lot better at doing that.
Well, that's a great point, Rick. Rick,
Yep.
Connor, you were going to say, what's your view of why there's not a higher discipline? I'm saying it's the CEO's not asking for it. Do you agree, disagree?
I completely agree. I mean, it's almost like a must-have. I do think in recent, since the COVID's obviously come around, it's the day of the employee, right? But I do think incentives are changing in general. It's not the new millennium group or whatever group they are today. The demands are much different. They want a different type of benefit. And to try and quantify that is extremely hard for an ROI for a company. They're all working remote. While a lot of these incentives are we have to do the work for them, because in many cases, they're not going to do it. So I think as an incentive companies, whether an incentive company or an advisor, we need to do the homework for them in order to really show, because there will come a day when a big line item might get cut. I mean, that's just the nature of any business, whether it's a travel thing or office supplies or payroll or whatever it is. Big line items do get cut. And unless
Or digital cards.
whatever it might be, is that we need to be proactive in going in there and showing them the ROI. The problem that we have is obviously, like I mentioned before, is that data. But no one's looking at it. If it's not broke, they're not gonna try and fix it, because they don't feel there's anything to fix. They don't realize it could be modified and become much more robust.
So Lincoln, from your standpoint, companies, I think you're going to agree that the CEO generally isn't demanding it. The CFO is generally not demanding it. So, and if you disagree, let me know, because I'd like to, so it doesn't get too repetitive, give you another question.
Yeah, well, I would like to
Okay.
chime in on that. So I think that, just for the audience, and, this panel knows this, so it's really for everyone else that might be listening. There's definitely a difference between, an incentive program that's performance-based and, a recognition program or a reward program or a loyalty program. So, I think for the listeners here, an incentive program by design should have some kind of results associated with achievement. And those achievements typically do have some KPIs that need to be reported on, ROI being one of those. So anyhow, I just want to kind of say that, there are certain instances where you might have president's clubs and, might be more of a marketing initiative or, networking initiative. And, those are kind of a different classifications that should have KPIs, and you can provide ROI, but they're less demanding. And I think that the attention that CEOs or CFOs have on those types of instances is extremely low, to your point, Bruce. But when you have sales incentives and performance-based true incentives, I do feel that there is a interest and a need and a demand, for that matter, coming from the top down to justify those. And, in my experience, that's where most of our business is in the B2B space. And so it is a lot more performance oriented. So I am seeing stakeholders across the board having more interest in demanding that.
And
I just
you
did
are,
a
you
Sorry to
are
interrupt.
in space, B2B,
Yep. But
Don't
that's
they
where
come to you for their expertise though? I mean, for you to design the program because they don't really, one CEO said to me, we don't know how to do this. Can you get down here?
no, you're absolutely,
They might be Southern.
That's right. But yeah, no, absolutely. I didn't say that they know how to do it, but they're they want some kind of justification for that spend. And that's where, people like us in this panel, and there's a lot of other experts that are out there that do have, expertise in program design, reporting, and kind of the analytic insights that you can provide. But it is something. Yeah.
Lincoln, this leads to my next question. And Rick, this will go to you, and it gets back to this issue, and then let's go around on this as well. This isn't taught anywhere. This isn't taught in school, right? The Incentive Marketing Association has a training program I'm proud to have helped create. It's been evolved years, many years since, but that program exists. But you go to any college, I don't care what school you go to, you won't even hear about incentive programs. And yet, Rick, we all know that incentive programs can cost your company shareholder value. Hello, Wells Fargo, right? Enron. So isn't part of the problem, Rick Garlick, isn't part of the problem that the blind is, honestly, it's not taught anywhere. Oh, and by the way, there's about 50 to 60 incentive companies. I don't know who plans these programs. I don't know what training do these people have? What do they have? Right? I don't know what they have. So, and everybody just accepts that. So, Rick, isn't part of the problem that literally we're spending billions of dollars on something where the blind is kind of slightly leading the blind off?
It's like a sacred cow.
And I would say this, my answer to that, Bruce, is, and I'm going to come back to what I said earlier, since the last major recession before the pandemic, that's, I think, when people really started to think about this and say, hey, we need to have a defense, a proactive defense for our program. And that's why I think, and I'd love to hear the opinions of the other panelists, but I think that's why this has been becoming more and more of a focus. Now, you're right. And really what it is that we have to think primarily first, when you're talking about ROI, we have to think about what are the outcomes, the business outcomes we want to drive. Right now, when I talk to companies about doing any kind of employee experience initiative, I always ask the question, what do you want to get out of this? Like, what's the number one thing that you want to achieve? The answer used to be 9 out of 10 times people would say, I want to learn how to take my employee experience, improve it to the point where I can impact my customer experience, the service profit chain. The answer today, however, has changed. The answer today is, I need to know, how do I retain my best people and how do I attract others? That's the number one issue. Human Resource Executive Magazine just did a study on this. And so what you have to do is, okay, let's start with turnover percentages. The study I just did, we were able to track it through electronic recognition tools. We could look at how much people were recognized versus how long they stayed with the company. And we were able to find a direct relationship between recognition and turnover. Now, again, when you look at the proportional difference between people who got recognized and people who didn't, and you multiply that using the SHRM formula that it takes between 6 to 9 months salary to replace an employee, and you do that math and look at, okay, what's the difference of the number of people who've left versus stayed in the recognition and non-recognition groups, you've now got a really big number. And
Business case, yeah.
Yeah, even if you don't believe that, people who didn't get recognized left entirely because of recognition, you can say, okay, let's cut that number in half or whatever you think, and it's still a big number. And it more than justifies an incentive program. And that's the thing. If you're looking to drive sales productivity, customer satisfaction, any of these sorts of things, you need to start with the outcome first and then link it back to incentives. And that's how you do it.
Mhm.
And Rick, isn't Rick Connor, isn't a part of the problem that oftentimes and we're going to talk solutions here in the second half of this program, but I think we first have to identify the problem, is that oftentimes companies know they've got to do something. Oh, well, they want to do an incentive, then they give it to a lower level person to find a vendor. The lower level person knows even less than the CEO or sales manager. And then often the debate is over what the reward is going to be. Oh, are we going to send them to Hawaii versus, so Rick, in your experience, this lack of expertise is really at all levels, isn't it? And that if we're going to address this issue, we've got to face that. Am I right or wrong?
You're 100% correct. I mean, very often we'll see someone who's very seasoned in this particular space, and very often it's like, hey, I get calls all the time, I'm sure like we all do. They have absolutely no clue, no idea. They're on a fact-finding mission. They don't know how to sell it. They don't know how to articulate it. They don't know how to measure it. They don't know anything. So that is a big hurdle. How do we get from our side? How do we get to the right side? Because they don't know what that reward is. They know what the business case is. They don't know if it's a trip to Hawaii or a digital gift card. They have no idea. So in many cases, we're educating people constantly about what to do, what path they should take, and then you hope that it gets to the next level. But very often it's a barrier because they don't know what they don't know.
And then how can you pass on to your senior management what you don't know? Now, one of the things, Lincoln, that I find really intriguing is, and I think this explains why the companies that do it without measuring it, because the programs do work. They do. Mm-hmm. And when you witness it, you become a believer, sort of like religion.
You drink the Kool-Aid.
Right? You drink the Kool-Aid and then you believe it. And as long as the company accepts it, that's great. We all believe it. We all went on the trip. Everybody loved it. And then, of course, as Jackie referred to before, the new CEO comes in, goes, what is this? And the CFO goes, oh, we could save $500,000 here. Well, blah, blah, blah. So, Lincoln, isn't the fact is the opportunity for us mm-hmm. is for the program advocates, whether it's a do-it-yourself case, it's the VP of sales or marketing, or in the case of a company using like your service, where you build in measures in there. You build them in because, as Jackie says, it becomes preemptive. Okay. Mm-hmm. So even if the CEO and CFO aren't asking for it because they love the trip, right, you're still building ROI. And so I'm going to ask the three different incentive companies here, whether that's something that they are doing or moving to, where literally you build, whether they ask for it or not, you put it in. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I think Jackie, nailed it earlier. I was at site in New York City. Bruce and I had a chance to see you there, and I did a panel discussion, and, it was with a lot of incentive travel experts that are in the room. They weren't necessarily program design experts, but the point of the story of that panel discussion was to be proactive, like Jackie said. Be proactive with understanding the goals, the objectives, what data can you acquire, visualize that, and prove that the KPIs and there is a return on it, because it's going to be short-lived if you don't do that and you're not proactive around it. So as an incentive provider, that's what we do. That's what we're trained to do. And that's what our expertise is. But if you're a do-it-yourselfer, those are things that you need to start to take note on, because at some point someone might come back and say, hey, why are we spending this line item and what are we getting in return for it? And you don't want to be caught without, some kind of data to back that up. So anyhow, I concur with that. And then, to what Rick was saying a little bit earlier, I just want to pull on another thread on ROI. There's lots of ways of measuring it, and always starting with that goal. And, you talked about turnover, Rick. I think that's a great way of measuring, a tactic or an incentive goal, and those being met reduced turnover, which equated to X dollars in savings. And so that's a very clear business case that you can go back to. It takes a little time to kind of construct it and find the right data to be able to build that business case, but it pays for itself by doing that diligence. In the B2B space, we see a lot with customer lifetime value, or net promoter score, cost of customer acquisition. These are other ways of proving that the initiative that you are putting forth is driving some other kind of return that's above and beyond just sales increases and gross margin dollars. So my point is that ROI in measurement can be very sophisticated. So just sitting back, know what the goal is, what are those behaviors, and to what Rick Connor said earlier, you have to have the data to support it, to collect it, and then visualize it.
Well, that's a perfect segue, Lincoln, to what I was going to talk about, technology.
Yeah.
One of the things that really
Good one, Lincoln.
amazes me,
There you go.
yeah, this is all, by the way, this has all been scripted, the whole thing. We were practicing for
Well,
weeks.
we're just passionate about the same stuff. That's why. We have a lot in
Exactly.
common.
Well, but let's get to that now, because one of the things that amazes me, is that everybody's talking about employee, I follow this for a living, right? And all the money, the big private equity money and VC money is flowing into recognition rewards, gifting rewards, where you give away awards. Well, I've seen that. This is the third cycle of investment capital that I've seen on the internet going after rewards, and we know what happened to the other two. So we'll see whether it's different. To me, the big opportunity is data, as Rick said, Rick Connor. And the big opportunity, and Rick Garlick, I've been telling you, the IRF has to do research on this, please, is enterprise engagement technology. And that's technology that Incentko offers, that Lincoln's company, HMI, offers, and that Jackie's company offers. And when I say enterprise engagement, I mean it does more than just recognize. It's not just peer-to-peer recognition. That's important. That's nice. But, what about learning? What about communications? What about suggestions? What about referrals? So, Rick Connor, tell us a little bit about how technology can provide quantitative and qualitative data in a way that is not possible or was not possible before.
Well, I think all of these, all three of us on this panel have platforms that really enforce true engagement. It's not just about, it's a spot, it's a hub where everyone can go to create that engagement. I think technology has allowed us to do that. You mentioned some of them, the referrals, the surveys, getting a pulse on what your employees look, or employees or customers for that matter, and what they look, what they feel, how they're doing. Again, it's a hub where everyone gets, it's a warehouse of data and information to create this cohesiveness. Particularly now, we found out that, as you can imagine, a vast majority of society is now working from home. They feel alone. Technology, our technologies that are all on this panel, brings those folks together, even though they're not together. It's peer-to-peer recognition that's out there, and that doesn't have to be monetary. These can be just pure recognition. Something I don't know if we're going to talk about or we're not going to talk about it. But there's a big difference between rewarding someone and recognizing someone. Many of the employees that are out there today just want a pure recognition. Hey, nice job. And technology allows peers from across the country to say, hey, Bruce got an award. He did a great job. He's going on a trip. It creates an environment where someone in California can say, hey, great, congratulations. Maybe I should get off the dime and get my butt in gear so I can go do that too.
So, Lincoln, are you seeing more interest from your clients in getting the data? Because your technologies, all of them, provide incredible qualitative data and quantitative data that really can be correlated to turnover, productivity, quality. Are clients getting more interested in that?
Well, definitely. I think, you have to kind of have a good integration plan for these types of initiatives. So, a corporation has their data that they have from their either CRM, their ERPs, their marketing automation platforms. So they have some data to already work with. But a lot of times these initiatives are going to be collecting insights on profiling of your employees or your target audience in a different way. So it might be firmographic, demographic, behavioral. Rick talked about pulse. So, learning, enablement, click-throughs, interest level. You can start to now really profile through these types of programs in a way to serve those customers and those employees in a very personalized way. So, that's all about, the data around the individual The other piece that these programs can provide a lot of benefit for is, collection of data that they don't have access to, not just on the personal level, but it might be sales transactions, claims processes, all of that. So, we've worked with, technologies that, have machine learning, where you have kind of the ability to have, OCR technology, collect the data, pull it into a database, and then reward depending on what information is on, those invoices or those receipts, and be able to, process that. So data collection and insights is absolutely a key driver for the future of where loyalty programs are going. And, not to talk too much longer, but Rick Connor mentioned, AI, and it is going to be exciting to see where the industry goes with the implementation of AI and how that's going to enhance the engagement tactics that we would use in the future.
Well, that's going to be a whole nother webinar on its own.
I figured we'll park that one for the moment.
Well, Jackie, so the whole issue, one of the things in your backdrop kind of shows that you've had a long experience in travel, but what are your thoughts about using technology to really turn travel experiences into a 365-day-a-year opportunity? In other words, I know Lincoln's company also does travel. I don't think Rick's does. But what about this notion that, hey, everybody's been on my trip. Why aren't we using the engagement application to keep everybody tied together throughout the year? How much are you seeing? Are clients getting interested in that? We always talk about the app for the trip, but then it's dead for 362 days a year. But by the way, Rick Garlick, saddle up. You're next. But Jackie, on this issue of turning a trip into a 365-day-a-year event, do you think there's a potential for that, or are there too many silos in organizations?
Oh no. It's all about building community. And two things I'm super passionate about, because forever I was pegged in an area where I was just rewarding the top producers, and that doesn't move the middle. So when you're doing a lot of things manually, all of a sudden you realize that you can automate it, and then you can go to what I call the holy grail to really move those middle producers. These are the people, and Lincoln was mentioning, that have been there forever, that know everything. And for whatever, they've never become a top producer. They've always been looked over. And then when the great resignation hit, that talent left the workforce, and that's really hurt us. And so when you can reward and recognize people in real time with rewards that are commensurate with their earning ability, sure, my trips are great, but my digital cards and the pizza parties and the green egg and the Kate Spade purse, I've said this once or twice, move that middle. And the people that are just thrilled to be recognized. I mean, one of my colleagues still has the first black and white TV ever won in an incentive trip, or incentive program. So those are the things that can really break down the barriers, because the greatest reason people leave jobs is because they don't feel recognized.
Here's what's funny. Well, I'm sorry, finish your thought.
Well, all I was going to say is that my really good friend, CHRO, and Jackie, who's in sales, had this conversation, and we had the epiphany that what HR and sales has in common is the only opportunity we have for real growth is to move the middle, because the top is already bringing it.
That's it. Well said. And that kind of leads to the whole issue, Rick, getting back to you on program design. The industry, and I was personally involved with the efforts, as my gray hairs show, to push. I was one of the early presidents of the IRF, and we really pushed for moving to, the needle on, measurement in the late 90s. And so would you say, Rick, would anybody have an excuse now if they said, oh, there's no way to measure these programs? Can anybody say that and defend it?
Not really. And I think, the technology discussion that you've just led, really, it kind of wraps it all in a bow, right? And, I even want to say from the survey side, and that's my specialty, having worked with Gallup and others on employee surveys, up until this point, almost, I'd say the large majority of platforms that take employee surveys, employee engagement, employee experience surveys are survey platforms. I'm working right now on a new product that is a data platform that basically can bring in recognition, turnover, all this other data that my colleagues on the panel have talked about, and then tie it back to survey data. So, what's great about surveys is that they are downstream predictors, right? So when you do a customer satisfaction survey, an employee survey, what you're using that data for is to recognize problems and correct before they result in people leaving the company or they result in a lack of productivity. And so if you can tie recognition into, say, employee feedback, then you've basically got a predictive tool that's going to be more helpful in predicting long-term departures or long-term disengagement that's taking place. So with this technology that's emerging and new stuff every day, Bruce, the simple answer to your question is no, nobody's really got an excuse.
Well, and Jackie, you were in the business before there was even really technology, but isn't this really CRM?
It's easier. Yeah. Well, this is the whole thing is that I don't think a lot of companies have really understood how important that internal CRM is with their own human capital, their own employees. Everyone values the CRM, for potential clients, but just like Simon Sinek says, customer will never love a company until the employees love it first, right?
Well, and Rick, the issue, picking up on what Jackie's just said about companies will pay up to $70 a seat for technology in CRM, and it's a
Externally.
it's a battle to get them to pay 70 cents a seat for employees.
Yep.
Now, all of you, nobody is yet really aware yet in the United States of something really big that is happening, and it is an earthquake about ready to. I don't expect any of you to know about this yet, but the Europeans rattled marketing about in 2016 with privacy laws that have affected almost everybody in marketing. Every time you go to your computer and a company uses cookies, they warn you of that. They don't have to in the US, they have to in Europe. But guess what? Anybody who does business in Europe has to do it. Well, the Europeans have now come up with a bombshell. I can't even say I'm totally in favor of it. It's so extensive. It's called the European Union Corporate Social Responsibility Directive, and it's going to force companies that do business in Europe to disclose incredible detail, including employee turnover. Literally, if you're Alcoa, in 2 years, everybody's going to know your employee turnover, whether you like it or not. Furthermore, all of the information has to be put into a database. So that means it's all going to be comparable. And the database is free. So you'll be able to go in and judge these companies. So all of a sudden, how companies treat their employees, how their supply chain and distribution partners treat their employees, how customers are treated, and how communities are treated, and the environment, we're not involved with that, is going to be public knowledge. And this is coming right down the pike. So I'm going to ask you, Rick, from a standpoint, you worked with Gallup for years and years and years, right? You were major clients. What do you think CEOs are going to think when they discover in the coming months that they're going to have to disclose detailed information on how they treat their employees and how they deliver their promises, and that it's going to have to be, they're going to have to provide metrics. And by the way, Lincoln, you're a big company. You're not going to have to do it, but you're going to have European clients. They're going to ask you to fill out, I hate to say it, a bunch of forms. Now, hopefully you're going to be ready for it. But Rick, you saw what happened when ISO standards took over in total quality management, right?
Yep.
Once Ford said you got to do it, then it happened, right? Well, ISO standards haven't taken off in human capital because no one has to do it. What is the impact, Rick, on when people have to report on things? What type of impact does that have on disciplines usually?
Well, I mean, obviously it reflects a major shift in thinking of the way a lot of people do business. Now, not surprising, we all know that there's a lot of pushback to ESG, and there's a lot of pushback to what people are calling woke capitalism. So that aside, whether you like it or not, it's here to stay. You're going to have to adjust to it, particularly as you mentioned, Bruce, if you're going to be doing business with Europe. So it's going to require a complete shift of thinking. And here's one, just because I like to be a little provocative on these webinars, that I think that, the typical person who's been elected to CEO positions has typically come from maybe a legal background, Maybe they've come from an operations background or financial background. And perhaps you're going to start seeing a lot more people coming from a human resource background getting those CEO positions.
Well,
So,
they're finally in the C-suite, right, Rick?
yeah, I'm going to say, I'm going to predict that as a trend, that you're going to probably start seeing people, a different type of CEO being appointed. And that's going to be a shift. That's going to be a little growing pain for people.
Lincoln, do you see I don't like forcing people to do things, frankly. I'm a libertarian too. And as long as it's legal, and you don't dump your costs on them, stakeholder capitalism doesn't mean you have to donate to causes. That's not what it is.
Right.
But this session is not about that. This session is about the fact that investors, when you read the European disclosure, you know what their justification is? It has nothing to do with social justice. They didn't even mention it. It's because non-pecuniary issues have a direct impact on pecuniary issues. The language is explicit. If you are a company with more than 250 employees, you have a social impact, and therefore people have a right to know whether you are externalizing your costs. You have a right to be a crappy company if you want, but you can't externalize your costs and dump them off on society. So what do you think, the potential impact is of companies have to making disclosures like this?
Well, I think, are you asking in the context of the incentive space?
In other words, you guys are in charge of managing motivation. You guys are in charge of engagement. You have the data on your technology.
I think, and I'll take it at the top, at the highest level here, that, I think the industry as a whole on that particular topic has a value in engaging in, recognizing and motivating to have certain achievement. And so, I think that, our services and our expertise could be valued in a higher level with those types of, demands being pushed on corporate America or, in the EMEA as well. So anyhow, I think, that we could offer solutions to help out to make sure that those KPIs are being met in a way that it's acceptable for the people that are viewing them to be accepted. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think there's a spot for it.
Yeah. Well, the bottom line is, the question is, can incentive and recognition companies play a role? And my answer would be if they want to. And if they don't, somebody else will. But Rick, obviously most of your clients aren't going to be affected by that law. Some of them you may in a certain small respect. But the reason I mention it is that GDPR, the privacy rule, that had an enormous impact, even though it didn't directly affect most of us, because it changed the conversation. So Rick, do you think that things like this, where investors are pushing it, not labor unions, not Black Lives Matter, but investors are saying, how are you treating people as material to my business? What are you doing about it? Is that an opportunity for Incentko?
Yeah, I definitely think it's an opportunity for Incentko and all incentive companies for that matter, because now it's forcing them to address an issue, right? That they've been there's plenty of people out there looking for jobs today. They're like, okay, if you don't work out, I'll go with somebody else. Now is full disclosure. They're going to have to address the issue. How do they treat these employees well? How do they keep them engaged? But it's going to take a lot of work for these folks. And that's where we all play a role in this. It's going to take surveys. It's going to be a very collaborative effort. What I think could fail on this, on the European side, is that if they do things behind the green curtain, right? And they go, okay, we're going to do this because this is going to fix it all. They need to be very collaborative in terms of talking to their customers, talking to their employees, figuring out what drives them, what motivates them, and then we come into play to implement those programs.
So wrapping up, getting toward near the end, Rick, are there any particular industries that come to mind that are really good at metrics, or any of you for that, all of you, any industry that comes to mind that's really good at metrics?
Yeah, I think, I'll just speak off the top of my head and say that the hospitality industry as a whole, I've done a lot of work there. They're very metric driven, right? I mean, they have a metric for everything. RevPAR index is their big one, and they measure employee satisfaction. They were the first really to go full guns on guest satisfaction through these technology platforms. So they do it really well. I think, again, the technology leaning forward companies, they're the ones who have taken advantage of, the technology that we've been discussing here, implementing it and coming up with a very good solution. I think, to summarize, incentives are good business. And, the thing I think that all of us would like people to take away is that there's a case to be made. You just have to think creatively how to do it. And if you can't do it, bring people aboard who can, because it's good for everybody.
Thank you for that. Jackie, your thoughts?
Well, I think what you need to do is analyze or assess where a client is at right now and how you can help them, the 2 or 3 baby steps where they can experience some success, get some benefit. And whereas if you just try to have a big paradigm shift, like one of my pet peeves is too many of my clients run a closed-ended program instead of an open-ended program. And so they don't get any of the benefit of a true incentive. But you have to meet people at the level they're at, make them feel safe and comfortable, experience some success, and then continue to educate and nurture them. Because otherwise, no one really wants to change.
That's a great point about guiding your client, getting them to start.
Having them feel safe, and you never make them feel stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Lincoln, so giving you your last shot on this, how do we inch our clients along to more measurement? I think Jackie's onto something there.
Yeah, no, I think Jackie said something that I also agree with, but I think also thinking big, and those little instances that you can get those wins, tying them back to bigger goals. And, at the end of the day, there's a corporate mission. If you're a publicly traded company, they're very black and white, and they're published for, stockholders to see and read. Think about all of the initiatives that help lead to whatever the business goal is. And there are some breadcrumbs that you can lead towards. So think big, but then be strategic with the initiatives that we're going to be implementing an incentive program for that can drive particular results that go to the corporate mission. So
help them become less fragmented.
Totally.
Get greater alignment across the organization. Rick, your last thoughts on how to move clients up the ladder toward greater science and discipline in this area?
Yeah, so I think, before I get into that, Rick had mentioned a point about hospitality, another business vertical that's high on having just a plethora of data is the real estate space. They're very transactional, easy data to get. The data space is very easy to ascertain. And obviously the tech space, right? The problem with the tech industry is if they're international, you may get a litany of different formats that you may get it, but they have the data. So that's just a comment off of what Rick had just mentioned. I think we all kind of mentioned it. I think in summary, I would say it's collaboration. I've mentioned it a couple times. You've got to be in front of these clients, these industries, to be a true partner of theirs, understanding what their business needs are, and then creating a model that's going to fit that needs, and then get the small wins along the way. But it can't be fire and forget. You've got to be along with them throughout the year. You've got to get in front of them. Really being a real partner of theirs is the only way you're going to get them to move on. And you really want to get to a point where if someone should leave, the data is there, the backup is there, the proof is in the pudding that these programs work. It doesn't matter who changes in control, they're on board no matter what.
Not just the SPAC, right, Rick?
Well, thanks everybody. And as sort of a quick summary and recap, I think there's a general agreement that the measurement in most incentive programs could be much better. There are always exceptions, but that it could be much better. And one of the reasons is that people tend to, if they do them and they like them, they believe in them, and they, until a new CEO comes along and says no, they do it. But that kind of really says that it's really behooves everybody to focus more on research, to focus more on program design, ROI, and even if the client isn't asking for it, try to build it in. I think that the industry itself started to talk about 20 years ago about ROI, and I think Rick Garlick has pointed out that there has been progress. There has been a greater willingness to build measurement, but we have a long way to go. In terms of technology, the role of enterprise engagement technology, and by that I mean technology that can bring the employees together with the salespeople, the non-salespeople, that can do training, communications, learning. All of those brought together yield not only the ability to put all of your engagement levers on one platform, on one smartphone, wherever employees are, but can give you incredible data. And I think another lesson here is that data is king, and that we really all do need to learn to become data analysts to see the link between how we move people and how it actually affects the organization's purpose, goals, and values. So there's an enormous opportunity for all of us as professionals and companies to add value. Finally, don't let anybody tell you that they're not measurement tools. The Incentive Research Foundation, theirf.org has lots of tools. The ROI Institute, Jack and Patty Phillips, ROI Institute, we highly recommend. At our websites, we have all sorts of links to tracking tools. And the most important lesson Jackie said, you never want to just have a closed-ended program that focuses only on the top performers. You've got to focus on an open-ended approach that gives everybody a chance to improve their performance. You've got to make sure you communicate it. You make sure that people are trained. You make sure that they're regularly encouraged, and that they see how they're doing, and that you make it fun. And then you measure and you recycle. So thanks all of you for helping elevate this field through your expertise. And this will be obviously available very shortly. We'll be marketing it throughout the year and summing it up in a feature article. So thanks again, everybody, for your help today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.